Hello and welcome to the Dial Global Virtual Lounge. This is the show where we discuss the future of the modern workplace and the impact of diversity, inclusion and belonging with the world's most successful and innovative business leaders. Today, I'm joined by three exceptional individuals, and we're going to be talking around the theme of inclusivity and diversity, but also the impact that is having given the unprecedented times that we are currently facing. Our panelists today include Lindsay Symington, the Talent Acquisition Lead for SEA and Emerging Markets at Experian. Also, Yvonne Lardner. Yvonne is a multifaceted multifaceted talented individual working in a number of different areas at the moment. She has formatively worked for the likes of Harrods and the Boston Consulting Group and is a corporate communications expert. She recently returned to the world of academia at Cambridge University. We're also joined by Harriet Padina. Harriet is the Diversity, Inclusion and Belonging Community Manager at Siemens in the UK and has had a wealth of experience within both talent and HR. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me here today, all of you, and really excited to discuss not only the world of D&I and why it's so interlinked with the present time, but also to learn a little bit more about all of you. And before we get into the nuts and bolts of today, I wonder whether we could go through a little round robin so that our listeners can find out a little bit more about each of you and some of the current pieces that you are working on and experiencing at present. Lindsay, I'm going to start with you, if that's okay.
Of course, yeah. So I'm the Talent Acquisition Leader for Southeast Asia at Experian. I also help to lead our Diversity and Inclusion Initiative, which we have named Superheroes, across APAC as well. So, I think at the moment, diversity and, more importantly, inclusion as well is so imperative at a time right now. I think that what I've noticed is that at Experian, we've really tried to prioritise inclusion because, we're all human beings, and with there being global uncertainty right now, everybody's feeling vulnerable, right? So everyone's feeling vulnerable, people are feeling disconnected, and I think that it's really part of human behaviour that you just want reassurance and you just want to feel safe and you want to feel that you can belong. So I think that's something we're really putting an emphasis on right now is that importance to inclusion at the workplace, because I really think this is what will make certain companies survive through these challenges right now. So yeah, we're just focusing on how we can support that.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. And Yvonne?
Well, first, thank you for inviting me today to share this platform with you all and to talk about leading in uncertain times. My professional career to date has been in brand and corporate communications, and as you mentioned, my ongoing academic interests are in social sciences. And so from a societal perspective, I'm in awe of people's compassion and courage and collective action as we all face this challenging time together, from the NHS, care workers, and really all essential workers who are out on the front line, graduates who are due to take their first steps on their career ladder, who are now facing job market uncertainty, and those who risk or are experiencing a sudden loss of income or access to much needed support. So over the past few months, a light has really been shone, and it's people's compassion and courage and collective action that fills the voids and enables us as a society to believe that we can get through this and to not only be hopeful about our future, but to reimagine our future. And, I believe we're living at a time in a world that is volatile and complex and ambiguous. And I honestly don't believe that there has been a more important time than now for us to collaborate and to cooperate and co-create. And our ability to actively listen and to communicate diverse perspectives will play a crucial role in our ability to be successful.
Thank you, Yvonne. And Harriet?
Hello, and yes, thank you for inviting me. I'm hoping it's going to be a really great discussion with our different perspectives. I've been working at Siemens for quite some time. It's a large organisation, and it's quite diverse in itself in terms of the types of people who work with us and the types of roles that they do. So during this period, we have You know, some people who are key workers, who are finding new ways of doing their roles in a sort of a factory environment to help the energy, healthcare, food industries keep going. Then we have the other side of the coin. We have those employees who are all working from home and working remotely. And one of the things that we are finding at the moment is that inclusion is something that's becoming a little bit more naturally, I think, to people, because everybody is realizing their colleagues' different circumstances that maybe have been a little bit hidden up until now. So caring responsibilities, for example, people who have are coping with sort of illness or other family members, etc. But also we're also recognizing that there are different types of people, and people respond differently to the situation at the moment. So interestingly, I think that this opportunity is giving more people an opportunity to understand that we are all unique and we're different, and that diversity is, as much as anything, about us all being different, and not about sort of protected characteristics or anything like that. So actually, in many ways, this is an opportunity for us as individuals and leaders to understand how important inclusion really is.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and I couldn't agree more with what all three of you have said, and to that final point, actually, Harriet, I think it has very, very much highlighted the fact that yes, we are all different, we all have our unique idiosyncratic differences and intersectionalities, but actually under the surface of everything there are so many similarities. And to put a positive slant on this where we can, and look at the silver lining, actually now is a perfect time to really bring us together and bind together that kind of that collective opportunity to really be humanistic and to really think not only about, of course, looking after ourselves and our families, but also to looking at how we as business leaders can really harness the opportunity to put inclusion at the forefront and also benefit wider society. And what's been very, very fascinating, you know, speaking with many different leaders, is a sense of community in some sense, and, you know, often digital community, since we are all kind of sitting behind screens at the moment at home, but harnessing that power and seeing how small the world actually is. You know, Lindsay, as an example, is over and across in Singapore right now, and we are all here as if we were kind of sitting together having coffee. It's just quite phenomenal, really.
Funnily enough, I believe that this is something that will really help us. Like I said, my remit is the UK, but we have people all over the country, and some on big sites and some on very tiny sites and some with customers. And by having many more discussions and meetings and workshops and things available virtually, includes many more people. Things that where people just couldn't simply have attended because it was at a different location suddenly are becoming accessible. So that's something that we are learning a lot more, and that I'm really driving in our organisation to say, you know, this isn't just coping, this is actually making the company better. So don't forget.
Very well said indeed. And to that point, actually, I wonder, how are we managing to pivot? And I guess any advice as well for those that are listening in, because I think, you know, as you all say, look, you know, right now there has never been a time more important to put inclusivity at the forefront, and actually to take advantage, if you will, of lots of individuals who perhaps wouldn't have you know, necessarily deem themselves as, you know, diversity and inclusion practitioners, or those that were, I don't know, within our various employee resource groups or whatever. But actually, it's time where we can bring people together and get them involved in the conversation where it might have been slightly more difficult in the past, perhaps in normal life, in inverted commas. So I wonder, how can we, you know, as you said there, Harriet, kind of, you know, almost pivot what we're doing and take advantage of the present environment and get other people involved in the conversation?
Yeah, I think that, just touching again on what Harriet said about the fact that it's such a unique circumstance, right? But it really does give you the opportunity to understand and really acknowledge the reality of like each individual circumstance and everybody else's situation. You know, you've got working parents who are having to split working a full-time job with homeschooling. You know, I have a 30 kg golden retriever who sometimes pops up in some of my video calls. So it really is making it a lot more inclusive, and people really get to know you deep down. And I do think that it's a great opportunity. I think as a leader, something that, you know, I'm trying to express to my team is that take that opportunity to get involved in that HR initiative that you didn't get the chance to do before, or get involved in cultural engagement, or get involved in one of the business partnering work. It's a great opportunity for people to upskill their workforce as well. I know myself personally, because there hasn't been an abundance of hiring, I've been able to get involved in, you know, creating a learning and development dashboard, and look at other initiatives that, you know, I've just never had the time to actually delve into. So it's a great opportunity to do that, and it's a good way to keep people engaged, and to keep your employees engaged as well.
Absolutely. And I mean, there's been some fantastic stories. In fact, only yesterday I was talking to, it was Auto Trader actually, and they said, actually, you know, where we are not necessarily hiring at the moment, and we are having to be potentially quite careful with budgets and such like, there are many, many things that you can do, which are, they can be very simple, such as even, you know, they've got photography clubs online, and they've got various themes. I think, you know, you know, the example given actually was that one week everyone had the theme of red, and they were to do something artistic and photography wise. It was just amazing, you know, from a slightly different diversity perspective, that one simple piece, red, that does conjure up these images of certain things for us, is that everyone's got this kind of different creative idea of what that actually means, and people are getting really, really engaged in this, and then really engaged in sharing what they're doing with their local communities. And you know, it's things like this that, you know, they're not difficult or complex pieces, but actually things where everyone can kind of get involved.
So yes, I think when a crisis occurs, it highlights the vulnerabilities of global interconnectedness. And certainly at the moment, leaders are acutely aware that further systemic shocks could severely challenge economic recovery and social cohesion. However, some of the crises that we're seeing today differ significantly from past crises in several respects, in that they're unexpectedly large scale, and they're new or unprecedented, at least in our generation's memories, and they're spread across geographic borders and policy boundaries as well. So during these rapid onset events and uncertain situations, when information is unavailable or inconsistent and people feel unsure about what they may or may not know or understand, behavioral science highlights increased human need for transparency and guidance and sense-making. And in these cases, many leaders are facing questions they may not even have answers to. And it's important that they communicate early and often, and that they navigate their conversations with care. Even if they're still trying to understand the extent of the problem, it's crucial that they're honest and open, as this will build trust and maintain credibility. And most important, they should approach the situation with empathy. You know, think of things from the perspective of whoever you're trying to communicate with, and put yourself in their shoes to understand their anxieties and their fears. So for example, you mentioned earlier the importance of intersectionality and the fact that people have multiple identities. So as well as being employees, those that you're leading now may also be homeschooling and caring for vulnerable relatives, or proactively and reactively leading support in their communities.
Mm-hmm. Some incredibly valid points there, and very articulately put. And on the subject of communication, you also mentioned there anxiety, and we talk of vulnerability a lot, which I think, frankly, is one of the most important things for leaders to demonstrate right now, and something which also is very difficult, because leaders in specific, whilst you know, they are almost the mouthpiece to their team and want to be there to put a shoulder, a reassuring shoulder and an arm around people, it's also difficult to almost maintain the confidence, I think, sometimes as well, especially when, as you've all alluded to, we don't necessarily know the answers. Even the best market research firms at the moment are saying it's very, very, very difficult to predict. And, you know, again, all of those differences are going to be very, very different depending on where you're based, what your personal circumstances is, you know, which country you happen to live in culturally as well. And so I think the amount of anxiety, you know, that we are feeling, especially as leaders, is very much that it's not it's not a weakness to show that that vulnerability. And I think it does show that almost, that humaneness and that very kind of, that personal soft side almost, that allows people to then share their own anxieties. I mean, we all know by sharing personal stories, it really does help others have the confidence to come forward. And so, communication at this point in time is absolutely critical.
No, I was going to agree with you. I think at all levels as well. So the leaders showing their vulnerability, but also encouraging others to get involved, so that it comes from across, because we all have opportunities during our day to connect with different individuals, and therefore, if you're shown the way by a leader being vulnerable, maybe showing their personal side, but then encouraging, almost like challenges and things like that. We're fortunate within Siemens that we have our own internal social media, for example. So we have challenges on internally to, what's the top tip that you've had today, or about, and it's not technical top tips we're talking about here. It's often emotional, or how do you collaborate, or how do you connect with people? Recognizing that we're never going to know how somebody is really feeling unless somebody is connecting with them. So I think the stories that the leaders are showing are helping other people to then continue that message on throughout the organization, whatever the level they're at. And that is very, very important.
Absolutely. And Lindsay, I guess from kind of a, talent perspective as well. And I think for not only talent and D&I professionals and communications experts, it is important that we aren't just, across the board and the C-suite, but it is that grassroots. And then it is also, the width and the expanse across the organization. How can we, I guess, kind of harness the power of talent and those diverse voices to actually communicate and support people during times like this, because everyone is feeling very, very different emotions now, mixed emotions, different circumstances. It's it's a difficult thing to kind of communicate across, especially such large, expansive organizations.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's something we've done really well. Our leadership team, and this is kind of to Yvonne's point as well, personalisation to the comms that come out are so important. We have, our managing director of HR within APAC, Sophie, is great at sending out internal comms, and at the end of it, she'll leave just her mobile number and a simple message saying, I'm here any time of day or night, whether it's working hours, whether it's not, reach out to me. You don't have to feel lonely. We have put things into place to ensure that, individuals who are based here that are in self-isolation or who are living alone, like it's different. I'm here with my fiance and I've got my dog, but there's other people who aren't in that position. And I think that these, very small steps just really personalise and really humanise the whole situation. And it goes a very, very long way, and it's very well received. And then you find that people will share tips. Like we have a platform that we've created internally called Horizon, and it's kind of like a Facebook page, but for business. So similar things, we will upload, people doing mindfulness and meditation sessions, whether it's yoga sessions. We have like an APAC picture of the week, so whether it's people who have the best workstation set up, just fun, and again just really humanising the situation. So I think that's really helped, and I think it's a great way to continue that even after this crisis is over.
Mm-hmm. That's absolutely critical, and I think we are, obviously, talking so much about these uncertain times, but these are lessons that can be taken on into the future, and hopefully things that will resonate and last for many, many years to come. And so, when you talk there about personalisation, I just think that's absolutely fantastic, because we all have very different needs and different kind of, requirements. And, again, coming back to a formative point of kind of intersectionalities, and I know that there'll be many D&I kind of practitioners listening in, but for those who are less familiar perhaps with kind of intersectionalities, actually that is the various different pieces that make us up as individuals, and how we identify almost. And so I think what's very interesting right now is that actually, no matter whether you're male, female, black, white, Chinese, wherever you are, almost, we are in this global pandemic together. And so it is, it's kind of just really hitting home the fact that it almost doesn't matter how many differences we may have. We still have got those similarities that exist below the surface level. And also, just moving on to I guess another topic which I think is particularly critical at the moment: health, wellness, and obviously mental health. Diversity does incorporate all of those invisible diversities as well. Be it social mobility, be it mental health or wellness, and communicating anxieties and sharing those feelings, is really critical to actually bring to the forefront why it is so important that we get involved in kind of health activities, keep encouraging each other, keep talking, keep sharing, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I believe a central point to any good diversity and inclusion initiative is that ability to foster strong human connections. And this has become increasingly difficult in the remote work environment we now find ourselves in. However, thankfully, digital platforms and other technological forms of communication are enabling us to connect over shared interests and build engagement. So, you have companies that are doing virtual happy hours, morning coffee meetings, digital town halls, and providing resources to help people navigate these challenging times and manage their physical and their mental and their emotional health and well-being. And I definitely think employee health and well-being must be the foremost consideration for any business during this pandemic. However, one of the greatest challenges will be understanding the needs and the circumstances of employees who are themselves are diverse in every sense and who are affected by widely varying life, work, and family conditions.
Mm-hmm. And balancing those all up, as you say, it's definitely somewhat challenging. We talked before about kind of homeschooling, having pets there, having partners and such like, switching rooms, all of this kind of thing. It just adds into that juggling act. And is there any advice that possibly we could share, not only about what we're doing internally when it comes to kind of health and wellness, but also tips that actually managing this quite crazy juggling act that I think we all have right now?
I think that one of the things that we have been doing for ages, actually, in our organisation, not specifically this particular period, was about giving employees the ownership for how they do their role. So this is flexible working, but not just flexible working. It's about flexibility of how you do it. So not just location or even times, but what you see is important and delivering on that. And that is becoming even more important, I think, now, because people are beginning to recognize that it's perfectly okay to stop for an hour, go to the garden and play football with your kids, or go for a walk, or something like that, and then coming back to work, for example. I think there are some people who, although they firmly believe in flexible working and understand logically why it's so important for inclusion and diversity, but it's only now that they're really genuinely experiencing it that it's okay to sort of balance from, now I'm working, now I'm doing something for my well-being, now I'm doing a bit more work, now I'm looking after my kids or my elderly mother or whoever it might be, and even just basic stuff like making sure they've got food in, and people are beginning to realize that you don't need to be quite so rigid about these things, and actually that can help you. So for me, that is one of the key things that is escalating. We've been talking about it for some time, but now people are really beginning to experience that, and letting go of sort of the fake sort of boundaries that we have previously had between work and the rest, home life. Obviously, there are going to be people in other industries, and certainly people who are used to contracting and things like that, who are very familiar with this. So this is new as such, but I think for some people it's new. It's a new experience, and so that for me is very important, that people are now beginning to balance their life better and not just by saying 9 to 5 is when I work, and this is when I sleep, and this is when I do anything else. You know, they're just able to get that fluid balance throughout the day. And I have definitely seen in the conversations that I've had with people who have been honest with me and said, yeah, Harriet, what you've been saying to me, I'm now beginning to experience. They have said that actually that's quite liberating. And so for me, that's a really positive thing, but also, you know, it's highlighting the importance of well-being beyond what people logically might have felt, I think.
I was just going to say that I completely agree. I think that it really does help to change the mindset and the behaviour of, you know, certain managers who maybe didn't feel comfortable with, you know, people working from home, but now just really showing that this can work. Yeah, I definitely agree with you, and I think that that's something that we've tried to do as part of, you know, part of our wellbeing agenda, was to encourage people that, you know, if you have kids, don't come in the office until 10, you know, drop your kids at school, or if you have to nip away for a doctor's appointment, it's fine, you know, it's okay, manage your own diary. But I think now, yeah, more than ever, people can actually see it working. So I'm really glad to see that change in mindset. It's really encouraging as well.
Yeah. Absolutely, and the flexibility is such a key topic at the moment, and I think is going to make a massive difference to what the future of the modern workplace will look like as we go into the next years, and indeed in the future. And as you've all said there, actually, when you look at almost organisations and businesses that are, you know, maybe a little archetypal or perhaps been stuck in their ways, this is absolutely forced that change home right now, where businesses ultimately have not, you know, if they were pushing back on home working, flexible working, whatever it might be, right now they've been forced in a position where they have to make it work. And so there is no option other than to trust the fact that people genuinely are going to be doing good work at home, whichever hours they are working. And you know, hopefully it has instilled confidence when you kind of, you know, you look now at kind of certain engagement scores, and what we're hearing back from the market, and certainly hearing back from yourselves, is actually, you know, it is, I think it's very empowering to a degree to certain individuals who maybe haven't had the possibilities of being as flexible, and or haven't even been able to maybe take certain jobs because of the certain requirements and because of their home lives. And so it's you know, just an absolutely fascinating topic, which I you know, am very, on a positive note, excited to see what will happen within the future of work, and actually how that's going to impact diversity and inclusion and belonging, because it could well very, you know, have a very positive impact on, say, social mobility as well, and opportunities to diverse communities. And you know, on this subject, I wonder, whilst we can't predict at all what is going to happen, this show is very much about the future of the modern workplace. What do we think, you know, from each of your kind of perspectives, what do you think some of the major changes could be, and also positive things that could come out of this from a inclusivity, you know, and diversity and belonging perspective?
I'm very, very positive about this. I really am. I worry, not in our organisation, but I just hearing from other people from other organisations, that people are saying they're so desperate to get back to normal, to get back into the office, that I worry that there are going to be there's going to be two halves, tale of two halves. There's going to be those organisations who are desperately craving to return to normal. But I think it's our role, those of us on this call and in similar roles, to work to stop that from happening. So my thinking goes quite broad. I think it could result in very different types of office space. I think it could it could move to a different way of using space, using meetings, that when you are getting together in a very purposeful way. I think that we will, as an organisation, definitely rethink the roles that people do, or sorry, not what the roles are, but how the roles are done. And I really do genuinely believe that will, as you mentioned, open up roles to different people, maybe different geographies. You know, you do this role, do I need to be that close to the office? No, I could do it from the other part of the country, which means that maybe people in more deprived areas have access to different roles that maybe they wouldn't have done before, and all sorts of different types of people with their personal circumstances. As we've already said, we're all beginning to learn a little bit more about one another, so therefore people are a bit more accepting. So for me, I have a very positive outlook. One of the things that we're doing in Siemens is we're crowdsourcing this. So internally, it's not going to come just from the leadership team or just from the HR team. We are starting up challenges to say, what do you think? How do you think it could work? What are the benefits? What are the innovations that you have done to build communication or collaboration recently, so that this is something that we can build an organization of the future. So that is starting now. So I have no idea where it's going to go, but I think it's really positive to have everyone involved in this, and it not being a sort of a top-down approach of, well, we've made the decision that. It's much more, what can we do? And I'm certain that this will come up with a whole load of new ideas that I've never thought of. So.
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree more. And I think leaders of today will need to exhibit more nuanced skills. And by that, I mean that effective leaders will have to embrace both their hard and soft skills if they're going to address the needs of their employees and customers and communities and investors and so on and so forth. And I think specific to communications, in the early stages of the pandemic, there was a public health strategy deployed to reduce morbidity and mortality, which involved effectively communicating risk and recommending preventative behaviors. However, the population's social and individual determinants, so things like education and income and race and ethnicity, led to communication inequalities and individuals and groups' inability to access or process or act upon information. Therefore, I believe that moving forward, we'll see an increase in the use of micromedia strategies in crisis communications. In the overarching messages will need to be quickly adapted in order to land with the target audience, and it will be driven through media that resonates. Now, this is widely adopted in communication strategies generally, but I think we'll see it happen more in crisis and preparedness comms. I also believe the way in which we prepare for crisis communications will change. So historically, preparing for a crisis has traditionally consisted of developing capacities and tools to prepare that we have somewhat been familiar with, whereas what this pandemic has highlighted is that preparing for the new landscape of crisis will require adapting to approaches that enable preparation for response to the unknown.
Mm-hmm. Very well said and very articulate. Yvonne, every time I speak to you, I can tell that you've had a career in comms, I must say. And Lindsay, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that what I find really interesting is, well, from my perspective, diversity and inclusion is owned by everybody in the organisation. It's not a single person who leads on it. And I think that we've really embraced a lot of our superhero events and our D&I agenda events for this year virtually. So we had International Women's Day virtually. I'm actually in the middle with the Superhero League in designing what our virtual Pride Month could look like. We're looking at how virtually we can, look at an inclusion week, so celebrating people with, mental disabilities, physical disabilities, and it really does bring more cohesion amongst the team, and everyone's allowed to bring new ideas to the table. So I feel really positive about it. I do think as well it's gave leaders a lot to think about and leaders a lot to recognise as well. I think that as a leader you're in a position of care for your team, but you also need to be in, so it's you're looking at the longer term strategies of your team, the longer term strategies of your business. But you also have to take a step back and take a moment to yourself, take that time to reflect, what are initiatives we can do more of, how can I bring more people into that conversation, but also to stay connected with other leaders externally and other members of the team, because something beautiful happens when you spark new ideas, new conversations. So it's really important to still continue to do that virtually as much as you can. So yeah, I'm quite hopeful that there will be more positives will come out of this than we think.
Mm-hmm. I concur, and some very, very interesting viewpoints there. But ultimately, on your last point, actually, Lindsay, on the leaders needing to have fundamentally that duty of care, absolutely critical. The emotional intelligence and the vulnerability that's required in specific at this point in time, and also the fact that when I, have the opportunity to speak with individuals like yourself and other senior C-suite leaders, one thing that always strikes me is those that truly, truly have engagement from their teams are ones that have really embraced the power of their emotional intelligence to listen, to learn, to adapt, and to take on board what people are saying. And on the point, I suppose, of emotional intelligence, whilst it might sound quite a simple thing, it's actually far more complex than I think people would give it credit for. And I very much hope, just as my slant on this this particular topic, that leaders of the future will, and I know it sounds perhaps a little twee, but leaders of the future will lead with the heart. I think very much business of the now and business of the past perhaps has been more so around intelligence and intellect. I'm not saying that's not important whatsoever. It absolutely is. But leaders of the future, certainly millennials, when we look at the kind of the intergenerational and the younger generations that are coming through the workforce, actually the desire and the absolute need and almost demands of organizations is that they stand for something that means something, that their leaders have that emotional intelligence, that their leaders do care about their workforces, because that is, it's the power of something bigger than financials and bigger than anything, really. It's knowing that there is a sense of purpose and a sense of being somewhere that you belong, and somewhere that, does want to harness, I guess, the power of social good. Now, before we summarize for today, and, I could talk to you three forever and a day, actually, because this is just right in my wheelhouse, these kind of conversations. But I have reached out to some of our members, and actually a number of people on LinkedIn who knew we were having the conversation today, have asked a number of questions. Now, I'm not going to have time to ask all of them, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pose a question to each of you. Nothing to worry about at all, because you're all experts, but three interesting questions actually that have come out here, and a couple of them I hope none of our listeners are annoyed with me for not asking, but I think actually a lot of them have come up during the conversation today as expected. I will try and ask something which hasn't come up to each of you. And first of all, I'm going to come to you if that's okay. But earlier on, you did mention the reimagination of our future and what that looks like from a communications and kind of a social innovation perspective. I wonder what are kind of the key tips, if any, that you might be able to give, not only to comms practitioners and kind of experts, but individuals that are looking at this point in time for some social innovation, given, frankly, actually right now it is the best time to try out new ideas. If not now, then when, hey?
Right, absolutely, thank you, and that's such a great question. I think overall we have definitely entered a new way of working, which will now see us innovating at a much more rapid rate. And the ability to achieve success will involve communicating with a wider group in order to draw on more diverse thoughts. So as businesses and as business leaders navigate this uncertain time, I think the COVID-19 crisis confronts leaders with the challenge of a lifetime, but it also offers the opportunity for introspection. So, what defines your company's purpose? What's its core reason for being? And what will the impact be on the world? And I believe that leaders are uniquely positioned at this pivotal time to use their wealth of power and knowledge and be guided by social purpose in order to bring social innovation to the forefront and aid the lives of millions. The world needs leadership that embraces a new way of thinking and a new way of working. And I think leadership that liberates brilliance and harnesses the drive and change of transformation. If done well, these actions in this crisis can affect in unprecedented ways. And the communities that these leaders serve will ultimately benefit from their ability to leave a long-lasting legacy on their personal and corporate identity.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very, very much for sharing, Yvonne. And Harriet, to yourself, and had a couple of questions here, so I'm going to kind of amalgamate. But obviously, you've had had the HR, the talent background, and are now within D&I. And a couple of these questions have come from D&I practitioners who are, I think, having a slightly challenging at the time at the moment. Not only when it comes to kind of pivoting their various strategies, and so kind of gone into a couple of examples here, but basically struggling to kind of pivot the strategies and also make sure that inclusion and diversity stays on the top of the agenda. I think in terms of, again, I think this is actually typical of a fair few diversity and inclusion practitioners that I speak to, is there's a limitation in terms of resource, and actually, that they're finding they're doing a lot of work, I think, themselves, and it is, it's quite relentless. I think a lot of people don't realize how relentless diversity and inclusion actually is. And so it was really kind of advice, guidance, tips from your perspective, being a successful D&I practitioner and in HR as to what you might say, not only to kind of further that message internally and get buy-in, but also make sure that this doesn't fall by the wayside, because a lot of work has gone into various different projects that are now being a tad sidelined given the present circumstances, basically.
Yeah, that's almost the holy grail that you're asking for. So, but what I would say is, it is relentless, but you also do have to just keep going, because for myself, when I first started in my role, a large part of it was trying to engage the community and create a community of diversity and inclusion people within the organization. You have to do that a little bit through inspiration and bringing people along. The vast majority of people who are interested are, well, they're all volunteers, but they're also mostly people who have experienced some level of being undiverse or inequality or something in either in their personal life or something like that, it's already reached their heart, I suppose. So that for me would be the first thing, is to try and engage people, and they can be at any level, because then you've got a group of people, and then it grows from there. I have learned so much from some of those people. So, for example, a colleague of mine has really been, well, two colleagues, I should say, pioneering lean-in circles within Siemens. So if you're not familiar with lean-in circles and Sheryl Sandberg, this started out about women, about women's into leadership, but now it's more about empowering people. So they ran a session on Monday about coping with period of change. And we did this virtually. 40 people joined, and it was a brilliant opportunity. And now this is something that I had really nothing to do other than, connected them to a couple of people. And so for me, getting those people to do something, it snowballs. Then the second piece of advice, as well as doing that, is you need to talk one-to-one with leaders. So if you've got the opportunity at any point, asking them whether they have experienced the benefits of diversity. If you ask it overtly like that, they'll probably panic and say, I don't know. I know, logically it's something we should do. But if you get under the skin of their stories, suddenly it'll start to come out, and then they suddenly have an aha moment where they go, you're absolutely right. That, that technical saleswoman who joined our team, she definitely changed the conversation within that team. And then you can say, there you go, you've experienced it now. And so for me, two parts. One is engage the community, and the other is engage one-to-one with people. And it can be only a half an hour conversation, but so if you can try and get into that, just get that half an hour, then you can sow that seed. Those would be the two things I would do. And in this particular time, the conversations I would do would be focusing on, how are you feeling right now? How are your team, and hear those stories that are really relevant right now, because then you're making it relevant to how they're experiencing things as a leader. They are potentially feeling vulnerable. So if you're supporting them, the stories will come out, and then you'll have an advocate. So that would be my recommendation.
Excellent, excellent advice. And that is it. You know, everyone, I truly believe, has got a story of diversity and inclusion, no matter who they are. So excellent. And finally, Lindsay, and this is a particularly heartfelt one, actually. I felt. I'm not going to say who it is who actually asked, but I think I'm pretty sure this may resonate possibly with yourself. But a couple of questions. One in specific from a young female leader who's feeling, and I actually empathise with this a lot, is feeling that they struggle to, one, be taken seriously, and two, to have their voice heard, because they're not necessarily the most confident of individuals, but and she says here, very ambitious, feels very ambitious, but is clearly feeling a little maybe a little bit out of place. And I think we can all probably remember times in our careers, and I think, to be honest with you, everyone has, I'm sure, if they look deep inside themselves, whether they be male, female, whomever, can remember a time where they probably felt they didn't actually belong. And so your thoughts on that. And again, I think the noticing here for the individual is that you are, you're a young leader yourself and achieved a lot. So any thoughts there from you, and in fact everyone?
Yeah, definitely. So I think I had spoken to you before about killing your inner imposter. I think that before I was having, now virtual meetings where there's like the managing directors on it, and there's CEOs or there's MDs, and you maybe kind of wait to speak until you're spoken to, or you maybe would be asked to lead on a project that you've never done before, and you're thinking, well, I've never done that, so I don't know why they're asking me. I think that it's truly important to kind of create that self-belief network to back yourself more. It's okay to try things that you've never done before. I'm doing it just now, as I mentioned to you. I'm working on projects. I'm like, okay, I have no idea where I even start with this, but you have to just build that inner belief and that inner confidence, kill your inner imposter and say, no, I'm going to do this, I can handle this, and just really use it as a platform. I think right now is a great time for people to explore their creative freedom and without judgment, because you've always kind of got that element to fall back on of, well, I gave it a try and I wasn't sure about that. But that's definitely the advice that I would give, is just back yourself more, work on killing that inner imposter, and don't be scared to say yes to things that you've never done before. Take feedback and always ask for feedback. I always ask my manager, how did it come across when I've done that? How can I deliver on this? How can I execute on that? What did you think? What was your thoughts? Getting genuine and sincere feedback is a great way in order for you to grow as a person. So I think that, as for that, don't be scared to take chances, and most importantly, don't be scared to be you. So don't be scared to be yourself.
Mm-hmm. Great advice. And I think something that I can see us all smiling here, because it's something that is relevant. I think it's relevant to us all. I think we all, not only as female business leaders, but leaders in general, have the responsibility to send the lift back down and to support other people. There's never been a more important time than there has right now to extend the branch and kind of support someone, and to encourage as well. So I think encouragement and kind of confidence. And again, I don't want to stereotype here, but I think especially in women and women in business, there is there's often a piece over kind of confidence, or having this imposter syndrome and such like, and feeling or presuming that everyone else knows far more than you do, when actually it's often really not the case. But inspiring that confidence can make the absolute world of difference. And sometimes the hardest thing is just putting your head over the parapet in the first instance, or saying yes after that. It's kind of, well, you're in it then now. It's kind of, as that famous book says, feel the fear and do it anyway. So without further ado, I will summarise what have been many brilliant learning points from today. And I have noted some down here, but I think ultimately, for everyone who's been listening in, I do hope that you've enjoyed the show. For me, it's been fascinating, always great to speak with the three of you. But across the board, even though you all have very kind of interesting different backgrounds and different perspectives, actually some of the key things that are really coming out, is the importance of empathy, the importance of vulnerability, the importance of really trying to harness that emotional intelligence. Look, no matter whatever sector you're in, wherever you are within your career, there is a difference that you can make, whether it be, through harnessing the digital resources, whether it, is that you're in HR talent or comms. Actually, communications right now are key. You simply cannot communicate too much right now. And I think as leaders, you absolutely can't, so keep on communicating and utilize those digital platforms, and try, as everyone said today, to think about this as a kind of a glass half full. There are opportunities in every challenge. There is an opportunity. So do your best, whilst it is very difficult, to see that silver lining and to utilize this as a possible learning piece for yourself. And now is a great time for personal development. I know we'll all come out the other end of this having learned a great deal. So thank you very much again, all of you, for very kindly joining me on the show. And for those that would like to catch up again, or kind of tune in on demand, or share this with anyone who you think could benefit, please do visit www.dialglobal.org. We have a COVID-19 support hub. This is in the series Leading in Uncertain Times, and so you can check it out at your leisure. If you'd like to reach out to any of our fantastic panelists today, I'm going to put all of the details for each of them and their respective businesses into the show notes. So if you missed anything, or if you were scribbling down notes as quickly as you could and you missed something that one of them said, or a nugget of that kind of that golden wisdom, don't worry, because we'll do the hard work for you and put down all of those key learning pieces so you can view that at your leisure. But thank you very, very much again, and thank you all, and look forward to seeing you soon.